much horse action in the Olympics, but
It's the jumping.
yeah, that's some really crazy, hardcore stuff.
The Housing Committee meeting. My name is Felipe Fuentes. I will be acting as chair today in the stead of Mr. Gil Cedillo. We also do not expect a quorum today, so all of the items that will be, or are agendized rather, will be communicated to the full City Council as a communication for an action there. So we do have, let me go ahead and just also admonish everybody in the audience that we won't suffer many interruptions in this room. So if I have to speak to individuals or speakers about interruptions, we're going to give folks one warning. We're also going to limit our public comment to a total of 5 minutes in total for every agendized item that we have here. So the most that anyone can speak today will be a total of 5 minutes when you add up all of the items. And so we will go ahead and begin. As I said, we will not have a quorum. We will move the items in this committee as a communication to the full City Council, and there we will go ahead and take a final disposition on the items. That being said, Mr. Clerk, if we could go ahead and read, I'm sorry, Mr. CLA, if we had item number 1, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Clay McCarter with the CLA's office. Item 1 is the appointment of Mr. Ernesto Hidalgo to the Rent Adjustment Commission.
Very good. Mr. Hidalgo, come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon. My apologies for not having more sandwiches in the picnic basket here today, but we're very excited about your appointment. Tell us a little bit about your vision for the Rent Adjustment Commission.
Well, I think it's no secret that the city at this time is suffering an incredible housing crisis, and it was recently reported in the LA Times that thousands of units of rent-controlled units have been lost in recent years with all the development that's happening in the city. And so I look forward to being in a position to really hear the needs of the folks in the city, those that are most affected by the housing crisis, and being equitable and as fair as possible and as responsive as possible in enforcing and carrying out the city's mandates under the standardized rent ordinance, or the rent ordinance.
Well, listen, I got to tell you, for one, I'm very excited because I know that your professional career is as an analyst for the city of Montebello, and to have your level of expertise as a resident of the city of Los Angeles aiding us in all of these really important issues is tremendous. So let me just, on behalf of this committee and the council, thank you for your service.
Thank you,
and for all the anticipated good things that you'll be doing for us in your time with us. Mr. Price, thank you for joining our meeting. We are currently on item number 1. We are privileged to have Mr. Ernesto Hidalgo, who is a candidate for the Rent Adjustment Commission, before us. If you have any questions, we're happy to entertain those, Mr. Price.
No questions, just happy that you are stepping up to serve. We appreciate your willingness to be a part of this governing process, and look forward to your unique insight and appreciation for your commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Hidalgo, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and we do have one speaker card. Mr. Wayne Spindler. You can go ahead and take a seat there. It's probably a little more pleasant. Mr. Hidalgo? Mr. Hidalgo, you can sit over there. It'll be a lot more pleasant experience for you if you sit in the public there. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Spindler.
Yes. The pickle address.
So now we add another puppet to another puppet commission. Yay! And he talks about what? It's called the Ellis Act. And the city is violating it like crazy. People are being thrown out of rent-controlled apartments and given nothing. Like, for example, last Thursday, Corin Price will evict up to 64,000 people with his little project called The Reef. The Reef is a ripoff for people who need affordable housing under the 1978 Rent Control Act of California. So please, Mr. New Commissioner, stop these goddamn developments and let these people stay in affordable housing, or they'll wind up slaughtered like pigs.
All right, Mr. Price, without objection, let's go ahead and communicate the recommendation of this committee for Mr. Ernesto Hidalgo to be confirmed by the full City Council. Very good. Without objection, that shall be the communication. Mr. CLA, item number 2, please.
Item number 2 is HCID and CO reports regarding the conversion of 4 former CRA residual receipt loans.
Very good. If we can have staff come and present on items number 2, I understand that there are recommendations for some changes. If you can just highlight those for us, that would be great.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Zen Cervantes from the Office of the CAO. Subsequent to releasing our report, the HCID requested to amend their policy.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. Mr. Spindler, this will be your first warning of you interrupting the meeting. You don't get any more after this. Go ahead.
Okay. So subsequent to releasing our report, the HCID requested to amend their policy for converting former CRA-LA loans into service payback loans, and we reviewed this policy and concur. Therefore, our office requests the adoption of the HCID August 17, 2016 proposed policy on converting former CRA-LA loans into service payback loans, a copy of which has been provided to you. We also request to authorize HCID to negotiate and execute amendments and take necessary actions to convert former CRA-LA residual receipts loans with Project New Hope, Center for the Pacific Asian Family Incorporated, and Pacific Clinics into service payback loans. The actual amounts of that will be converted will include accrued interest through the date that the city attorney approves the converted loans as to form and legality. There's no impact to the general fund, and the recommendations in this report comply with city financial policies in that there is no additional cost to the city. I'm available if there's any questions.
Very good. I do have one question. I absolutely understand the conversion to service payback loans. Do we have to get any authority from the Department of Finance or the successor, I forget the governance board that stands in the place of the former CRA to be able to make the conversion?
Good afternoon. This is Corey Smith, the Housing and Community Investment Department. These loans were fully transferred to the department or under the department as the successor agency, so I do not believe so.
Got it. Very good. That answers my question. Mr. Price?
Yes, so service payback, this is, the agencies are providing services in lieu of actual financial payment. Is that the way this is going? And it's extended for what, another 30 years or 40 years or 5 years, or what's the term on this?
Their terms will remain the same, but they're owed. They will not owe funds, residual receipts as in the form of cash. They will pay with the services they provide, all of these agencies.
All right, thank you.
Very good. We will go ahead and make the recommendation to adopt the changes that were presented by the staff and adopt the staff report, and we'll have that go before the full city council without any objection. Again, we don't have a quorum, so it'll just be a communication from the committee if that's okay with you, Mr. Price.
Fine.
Very good. Look into.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the committee should adopt the revised attachment to item 2, which was passed out in committee.
Correct. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. We do have a card on that, so I was premature on that. My apologies. There is a card here from, it looks like it's Tello Emin.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Tello Amin. I'm an attorney at Shepherd Mullen and representative of Pacific Clinics. We're just here to say thank you to the staff for their hard work and support in this project. It's really important for our clients, so I just want to convey that.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Spindler.
Yes, now, residual receipt loans. Does anybody here really know what that means? Of course not. It's more Wall Street paper money. And you know what's going to happen with Wall Street. Boom. Crunch. That's what's going to happen, but 4 of them, we can't just have one. 3 nonprofits to provide shelter. Shelter for who? For animals and people or just people? I think you should provide animal shelter and people with animals who have disabilities.
Mr. Spindler, you are now off topic, and this will serve as your second and last warning.
Yeah, just toying with the pig.
Well, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that you understand what's happening here before we throw you out.
Yeah. So,
Shelter and transitional housing for the homeless is a lie. And this guy's a liar too, so vote no on all of this shit. Thank you.
Very good. You bled into your third minute, so you'll have 2 minutes remaining for public comment. All right, very good. Staff, we will continue with that recommendation and communication to the full City Council. That brings us to item number 3.
Item number 3 is an HCID and CO report relative to the Affordable Housing Listing Service.
Very good. If we can have staff come on up. This is actually very perfunctory here, gang. It looks like we're just doing an amendment, but if you would like to make a short presentation, we would welcome it.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Zen Cervantes from the CAO, and our office requests authorization for HCID to negotiate and execute an amendment to a cooperation agreement with the Community Development Commission of the County of Los Angeles and Emphasis Computer Solutions. There's no impact on the general fund, and the recommendations are in compliance with the city's financial policies, and that the amendment will be paid for by the special funds. I am available for any questions.
Very good. Mr. Price, do you have any questions on the amendment?
No, I don't.
Very good. Hearing and seeing none, we will go ahead and take speaker cards. Thank you so much for your presentation. Mr. Spindler. Very good. Mr. Spindler passes and forfeits his minute. Okay, that takes us to item number 4.
Mr. Chair, will the committee be adopting the CO report for item number 3?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Carter.
Okay, item number 4, motion Cedillo Harris Dawson instructing HCIDLA regarding a fee study relative to regulatory compliance.
Very good. You know what? Thank you, Ms. Wong. We're going to go ahead and continue this item.
Very good. That takes us to item number 5, HCID and CO reports relative to the feasibility of implementing a tenant buyout agreement program for the RSO.
Very good. Staff?
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Zen Cervantes from the CAO, and our office requests authorization for HCID to work with the city attorney to amend the Los Angeles Municipal Code pursuant to the recommendations discussed in our report. And we also request a report back to the mayor and council on the financing and staffing requirements and costs to implement the new tenant buyout program, and instruct the Rent Adjustment Commission to adopt rules and or amend existing regulations to effectuate the proposed language changes relative to the RSO amendment.
Very good. Now, can you get into, well, the CAO, let's talk to staff here. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you would go and sort of produce for us.
Good afternoon, council members. This is Anna Ortega, Director of Rent Stabilization for the Housing Department. This would be an amendment to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance that would establish a new program on tenant buyouts, otherwise known as cash for keys. The city and the Housing Department are seeing more and more instances of cash for keys offers and LS evictions and removals for vacant units. The proposed RSO amendment would seek to address tenants being pressured out of the rental units without relocation assistance, or perhaps accepting a lesser relocation amount than they're entitled to under the Rent Stabilization Ordinance. Some of the history is that this was initiated through a budget instruction to the department in 2015, and then the Housing Committee directed us to develop a proposal for an amendment of the RSO. Basically, what the amendment would do is allow landlords and tenants to agree to cash for keys arrangements, but it would require full disclosure that the tenants are not obligated to accept a buyout offer, that the RSO provides certain legal reasons for eviction, and to note the required relocation amounts under the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, which currently range from $7,600 to $19,700 per unit. The tenants would have the right to rescind their acceptance of such a buyout offer within 30 days. This would give them an opportunity to consult with the Housing Department or a legal aid representative to talk to someone after they've accepted such an offer. And if the landlord doesn't serve the required notice, then the tenant would have the ability to rescind their agreement at any time. So basically, it would require certain information to be provided to tenants at the time that they're extended a buyout offer, and landlords would be required to file a copy with the city.
So I have a couple of questions for you, but I also do want to hear from our public speakers. I think that'll help inform the conversation. Mr. Price, if that's okay with you, why don't we go ahead and go to public comment, and then we'll ask you all back to the center table. So let's go ahead and get Mr. Spindler up first.
So, cash for keys. What a great idea. It's about time that the people be paid to leave the city. It's an excellent guess. Now, the question is how much money? How much money should these people be paid to leave? $50,000 each. Of course, that is the right amount. So you'll be giving each person $50,000 to leave their tenant-controlled, rental-controlled housing and leave the city. What a great concept. And I thank the chair, and I especially thank Mr. Cedillo for all of his help raising the amount from the paltry $16,000 to the new $50,000 amount. Thank you, and I think this is a wonderful thing. Cash for keys.
All right, let's go ahead and take up Jim Clark, Mark Voice, Carlos Aguilar, and then we've got more speakers after that. Oh, no, the 5 minutes is in total for, you've got your regular time there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it's not, we're not going to allow one person to take all 5 minutes.
What's going on over there?
It's an aggregate of 5 minutes per speaker in
Got it.
all the agendized items. You've got.
Now I understand the concept, and I can completely appreciate it.
All right.
All right. I guess I'm going first. Jim Clark, representing the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee. Look at these tenant buyout agreements are voluntary. They're voluntary agreements. They can be introduced by either the owner or the tenant. There are cases when that happens quite often. They are not no-cause evictions, which are already required to be filed and approved by HCID. If this is truly about making certain tenants know their rights and amounts of the levels of relocation fees, there are 4 tenant outreach groups that are funded with hundreds of thousands of dollars that are charged to do that. We think that this proposal is unnecessary and in some ways smacks of HCID bias, with the department taking the side of the tenants with regard to the voluntary and private negotiations. HCID should be assisting each group, tenant and landlord, equally in this matter, and we would suggest that we send it back to the department for more input from each of those groups so we can come up with a better idea, and we do have those ideas. Thank you.
Very good.
Hi, my name's Mark Voice. I'm a tenant at 1861 Rodney Drive, 90027. A week ago, a representative of my landlord showed up on my front doorstep, handed me a sheaf of papers and said I had to move. And I said, I don't want to move. And they said that they would give me money for my keys if I would voluntarily give up my tenancy rights. And I was led to believe that that was the only option I had, that I had to leave. There was no other option available. No relocation or anything like that was made readily apparent to me. I've grilled this poor girl for like 45 minutes about this thing. And when I brought up the possibility of, like, after this massive renovation project they were supposedly going to undergo, if I would be able to move back in to the apartment at whatever rent that they maybe want to do. And they said that they could put me in a place, it might be in an SRO or like in less than desirable circumstances. And, you know, this scared me because I've been here for I've been in that apartment for 11 years.
If I can ask you to wrap up, please.
Yeah, sure. And, I think they need some kind of agreement to tell us all the information up front.
All righty. Thank you very much. Mr. Aguilar?
Thank you. Carlos Aguilar, Coalition for Economic Survival. CES supports the proposed tenant buyout agreement program. If the number of RSO units lost and tenants' displacement is not bad enough, they don't really tell the full story. While LS Act evictions are spreading throughout the city, we have seen an additional trend that greatly concerns us. As you've heard, landlords are becoming even bolder, using more illegal tactics and offering cash for keys to get tenants out, thus avoiding having to go through the LS process. So we have no way of knowing how much tenant displacement and affordable housing loss is really occurring. The buyout offers we are seeing range from below the legal relocation amounts to those that, in a few cases, may exceed the RSO amounts. For the most part, low-income immigrants and non-English speakers tenants are targeted for the illegal amounts. The lower illegal amounts, excuse me. Many tenants don't know their rights and believe they have no choice but to take that money and leave. Unscrupulous landlords get away with this unless these tenants come to CES or another tenants' rights group or HSID. This ordinance, while it's not the end-all, will provide some needed protection and a process for buyouts that will hopefully stop some of this illegal activity.
Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. All right, so we're going to go ahead and ask Richard Otterstrom, Joy Meads, and John Hirata to come on up, please. Hi, Richard.
Hi. Hello, council members. What we have. I am from AGLA, Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, and I wrote that I was against this item because it didn't have the apartment associations and the apartment owners represented to try and work out what could work better. There's a way to both achieve the consumer protection aims of this item while protecting privacy and ensuring this does not become another regulatory burden on independent rental owners. An RSO awareness campaign was recently launched by the mayor, and there are other ways to ensure people have easy access to information. Let's utilize what the housing department already has instead of creating something new. I think there's enough there for them to work on. Thank you very much.
All right, very good.
Hi, my name is Joy Meads, and I've lived in a rent-stabilized apartment in Los Feliz for 5 years this month. Last week I was visited by a representative of the owner who said that my apartment would need to go through extensive repairs that would render it inhabitable. She gave me a cash for keys, voluntary termination offer, and said I had until the end of this week to sign it. She made it sound like it was my only real option and really scared me about the alternatives. I didn't sleep that night. I can't afford the rents in my neighborhood. And the next morning I posted on Facebook and I said this thing that had happened and asked for people to keep an eye out for, apartments in the neighborhood. I heard from so many people on Facebook who had experienced this same thing. And I heard from 3 separate friends who had gotten similar offers and had later learned that they had been misled about their rights. And that actually what they had been told was false. Somebody was told that that there were extensive repairs that would render their apartment uninhabitable, and then saw the apartment listed on Craigslist the month after they moved out for $3,000 more than they were paying every month. Another friend.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sir.
Hi, my name is John Hirata. I also live in a rent-stabilized apartment in Los Angeles that was acquired in April. Last week, I was actually informed as well that the building was undergoing a number of renovations for the next 12 to 18 months, and that we would be required to move out. A third-party eviction agent was hired by my landlord, and she's been pressuring us to sign the paperwork by the end of next week and to move out within the next 30 to 60 days. Just to give you an idea of the tenants that are dealing with this, we have a 94-year-old woman who has been there for 35 years. She lives with her daughter, also senior, and she was under the impression this was a done deal because of all the pressure that's being placed upon her. We have a family of 4 who speak English as a second language, and since the parents are out working all the time, I actually caught the eviction agent pressuring their daughter to get their parents to sign the paperwork. We have a woman who has been living there for over 40 years, and she doesn't have a car. She rides her bike to West Hollywood for work. She doesn't know how she's going to move. So I strongly recommend that the city move forward with this measure as a great first step to protecting tenants' rights. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. John Lavin.
Hi, doing? My name is John Lavin. I completely agree with everything John Harada said. John lives in my neighborhood. I spoke to him because this exact same thing happened to my apartment last year. 15 people in our building stayed because we decided that we weren't going to buy their claims that they were going to renovate, that they were going to turn it into a condo, that they were going to do all these things that we had to move out. So we applied our rights. They ultimately worked around us, and the units that were renting, that people stayed in that are renting for $1,000 or $1,200 or in my case $1,700 are now trying to get rent for $3,300. So this is clearly a predatory practice. They prey on ignorance, on seniors, on people at ESL. People don't know their rights. People in New York, there's a difference between New York and LA right here, is knowing their rent rights. So it's necessary to create this because presently there's nothing to protect tenants. And this is it's a barrier to say, okay, here's what things are. Here's your rights, here's your offer. Everybody understands this because without it, people are getting mowed over. There's a war out there in LA, and everything is so disparate that it's very hard for everyone to communicate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lavin. All right, let's go ahead and have staff come on back up. Oh, I'm sorry. So, yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. Before you come on up, Emilia Lomeli.
Well, I just made note. I've been coming to these meetings for some time, and I'm here. My comments today do not have to do with, whom I work for in creating affordable housing, but I have a complaint. You don't have a quorum today.
Ma'am, the time that's allotted to you right now is public comment on item number 5 that deals with the rate stabilization ordinance. So if you wanted to speak on public comment just in topics that affect this committee, that would be at the end of the meeting. So if you have comments for this item, we're happy to hear them.
Okay, so I'll have a comment for that item.
Very good. We'll go ahead and at the end of the meeting take your...
No, this item.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so you've heard from everyone that says that this is occurring, and we know it. So I think it's really a disservice for councilmen not to be here to hear concern that it's hurting the community and displacing everyone. That's what I have to say
Very
on this
good.
topic. I'll address
Thank
the
you.
other later.
Just for the record, you may have missed it when I began the meeting, but at the initiation of this meeting, I informed the public that we would not have a quorum. But it is our custom and practice that if we don't have a quorum, we are able to communicate items from this committee to the full city council with a recommendation, in which case the full city council will act, and you can rest assured that the council members and their staff are well informed of the items that are before the committee. Unfortunately, we do have a member that is sick and others that had other engagements, but trust that we will move the work towards a full city council so there are no delays on these important items.
I've been here for 6 months, and not once have I seen Councilman Weiser. I know how committees work. If a representative does not feel the responsibility,
my job is
they are
just
removed.
to provide a clarification for what we're doing. We hear you, and Mr. Weiser does attend this meeting. Okay, very good. If we can have staff come on back up, please. Thank you so much. I wanted to start by asking the following question. So the action before us instructs you to do exactly what?
It instructs us to work with the city attorney to develop the ordinance to amend the RSO to implement a tenant buyout program.
Got it. And in February of this year, the HCID report said that there was a potential need for a fee analysis on the RSO, and then subsequently it looks like the RSO fees would substantiate the program, but there was talk about potentially needing a fee analysis. Is that still necessary?
Not for this program, and thank you for bringing that up. We are also requesting in our transmittal position authority for 2 positions, 1 housing investigator and 1 clerical position to handle and implement the new program. This is an entirely new provision of the RSO, so we would need the staff resources to carry it out. We've had our budget team look at the current finances and fee structure, and we have determined that at this time we have sufficient resources and salary savings that we do not need a fee increase at this time. So we are requesting the position authority for the 2 positions.
Got it. So I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here because I actually have had the opportunity, Mr. Price, when I was in the legislature, renting in Sacramento and actually had to go through a cash for keys transaction. So I have a little bit of knowledge on this, understanding that it's different. Up until this point here, you mentioned that there was a conversation initiated during the 2015 budget proceedings that asked for this instruction during our budget proceedings. Wasn't initiated by motion.
Correct.
Okay. Now, the reason that sort of gives me a little bit of pause is because it's something that I think government, in particular state government, probably shouldn't do during the budget deliberations. We shouldn't do policy decisions when we're making the appropriations. But alas, we're here today and it's moving along. So just playing devil's advocate here for a second, up until this point, do we have a policy in place that works with tenants and landlords on cash for keys? And if we don't, how is it that we've survived this long up until this point?
I'll just offer a clarification about the process up until this point. So it did come from a budget instruction, but then it was scheduled in October to the Housing Committee, and then we received additional instruction to look at this.
Okay. The only reason I mention all of that is because it seems that we figure out very conveniently how to grow departments and offices. You're asking for budget authority. I have no question that you would use that money and those resources well, but we're growing a new program or a new process in the RSO program where we didn't have one previously, and so I just would much prefer that that policy conversation happen in a policy arena versus a budget instruction, and now we're drafting policy. So that just gives me sort of a little bit of pause as we're supposed to govern. But understanding that we don't have this policy in place today, how do tenants avail themselves of this information?
So right now, there's certain legal reasons for eviction. There's 14 legal reasons. Some of them are tenant at fault and some of them are tenant no fault. The no-fault evictions require information to be filed with the housing department, and that puts it on the record and gives an opportunity for the tenants to be notified and learn about their legal amounts of relocation that they're entitled to. And if they're not getting that, they can file a complaint with us to be investigated. The problem with the cash for keys...
the distinction being that this is completely voluntary. It's not an eviction.
It's not an eviction at all. And so what is achieved for one thing is because it's voluntary, the unit is then subject to vacancy decontrol for the new tenant, right? Because the tenant voluntarily accepted a cash for keys offer.
So that destabilizes that particular unit?
That's a voluntary vacancy, and then the rent can be reset at market to whatever the landlord can get from the new tenant.
Okay, and that is automatic on day one of the vacancy, or is there a certain amount of time that we can reclaim those units?
No, for any voluntary vacancy, it's vacancy decontrolled.
Okay, so let's say for a second that, notwithstanding this cash for keys process, is there another mechanism by which tenants would vacate voluntarily? Without, I mean, it's not a cash for keys thing. Let's say I, as a renter, say, you know what, I'm leaving this RSO unit. I don't want it anymore. Does that then put that unit into a destabilized mode?
Yes.
What is our policy sort of protection for that instance?
Well, that's how the Los Angeles RSO has been structured, where after there's a voluntary vacancy, the rent can be set at market. That's been the way our law was since the adoption. And it's actually now the law statewide after the Costa-Hawkins Act. And that's okay. I mean, tenants need to move, have other changes in their life.
Except that we lose a unit.
We don't lose a unit. It becomes decontrolled, and then for the new tenant, it gets recontrolled. So the Los Angeles Rent Stabilization Ordinance protects the tenant in place, but decontrols the rent in between tenancies.
In between tenancies, so the subsequent tenant would have the protections of the RSO?
Yes.
Okay. But so in between the tenancies, what happens to the unit?
That's when it's vacancy decontrolled and the rent can be set at market for any new tenancy.
Okay. So I think the reason I'm asking these what-if scenarios is that if we had proceeded from a policy perspective on this issue, I want to make sure that we try to figure out how to protect RSO units in every scenario. And here we're now going to go ahead and speak to the cash for key situation. I'm concerned about the other sort of opportunities too where we lose units. And so I'm not completely clear, but Let me move on here. So in terms of the process that you're now asking Budget Authority, I presume this would have to go to the Personnel Committee, and then from there, the full City Council, and we would make the Budget Authority be able to hire additional people to oversee this new process. Notwithstanding all of that, what else do you have to do aside from draft the sections in the RSO? Are you doing stakeholder outreach? Are you sitting down with our partners, landlords and tenants, to understand how it is that we can better facilitate the transfer of this information to tenants and landlords?
Absolutely. We have an extensive outreach campaign going on. This would be a new program that we would be doing outreach about. We'd be putting it in our website, putting it in our informational materials, doing the workshops that we do for landlords and tenants.
Are you doing that through the RSO working group?
We network with the RSO working group, but the outreach is much beyond that. That's just a small.
Sure, no, but I mean, I think that there's an opportunity for buy-in or facilitating ideas. They're not binding, obviously, but I think if we sat with folks, that would be very beneficial, separate and aside from all the outreach efforts. Prior to everything that you say that we're going to begin to do, what do we currently do?
We have extensive information on our website. We network with both landlord and tenant groups. We have currently buses and dash buses and transit ads all over the place at bus shelters and so on about
and
the
that's
RSO.
not working? We need to figure out how to add this. And how is it that we know it's not working well enough?
That's working for general information. The problem with the tenant buyout situation is that creates a crisis with individual tenants who may not be knowledgeable. If they are knowledgeable and they call us, fine, we can give them the information, then they can make a fully informed decision. But on a case-by-case basis, tenants may be pressured out and may accept that offer, and then it's a contract, so they have to follow the terms of that. The Cash for Keys Amendment would give them an opportunity to sit back, think about it, get some information.
30 days?
Yes.
And, okay. So understanding, Mr. Price, do you have questions?
Yeah,
please, Mr. Price.
Yeah, just a brief one. Back on this outreach effort again, because several of the speakers suggested that there was a process in place for outreach. It was referenced the number of organizations that currently have contracts to do outreach, the mayor's program. So what's going to be different here than is not currently going on?
Well, actually, the tenant outreach the existing outreach contracts are for REAP cases, so that's a specific scope of work that they have. These properties where there's cash for keys offers going on are not necessarily in REAP, so they would not necessarily be addressed by the existing scope of work in the outreach contracts. So the overall RSO outreach that we're doing is to create the awareness that the housing department is here, you have certain protections, call us and get information about what the protections are. So it's more general, but when tenants are getting cash for keys offer, as you heard from some of the speakers here today, they feel pressured, they think they have no choice, they think that they're going to lose their home, and so they may accept an offer before they're fully understanding of their rights. So this is basically, we're not saying you can't do a cash for keys arrangement, we're just saying you must provide certain information and transparency, and there's a 30-day period during which the tenant could seek guidance from experts.
And at what point do the landlords submit the agreements? At the beginning, or after they've been approved, or what's the process for registering these agreements?
They would submit them once the tenant has agreed to it.
And then what would the department do?
We're going to look at them, see that they comply with the requirements, and then we have them on file so that if the tenant wishes to rescind it, we have a record of it.
And it sounds like some of the organizations, landlord organizations, were suggesting that they had not really been involved in the discussions, that they were not a part of these deliberations. Any comment on that?
Because this came through an instruction from council to the department, this was not an item that was on the agenda for the RSO working group. So This is outside of that.
Is it something that the SRO working group would take up, or
They could.
do you see any value in having some input from landlords on this process?
Certainly, the way we got here is through instructions from council and from the committee. But certainly landlord input is always valuable.
Thank you.
Mr. Price, if it's okay with you, I wouldn't mind adding that. I mean, it seems like we've got a little ways to go here. You got to get the city attorney to draft language on the Rso amendments, the potential amendments. You've got to now go and ask for permission from the personnel department for the additional appropriations to expand your department to be able to handle this additional workload. So it seems to me that there would be time, if it's okay with you, Mr. Price. I think that I would like to recommend that you agendize it with the RSO working group. Again, none of this is binding. It's just an opportunity to have a conversation, and you never know. You might have additional ideas that hopefully, at least from my perspective, save a little bit of money and time, because I think what's important here is we want to make sure that the information is out. Right. Interestingly enough, we've survived until now without this process in place. It's not to say that that's the best situation. It is to say, though, that I don't think that it hurts to have some additional conversation as we move forward. So if there's no objection, I'd like to add that recommendation that HSID convene at least one agendized item with the RSO working group to have this conversation, because we've got a little bit of time before you get the additional dollars for the department and the language back from the city attorney's office. Okay? Okay. Very good. That will be the communication to the full city council. That takes us to item number, and we adopt the additional reports as, but with that additional addition.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Item number 6.
Item number 6 is a HCID and CEO report relative to releasing the 2016 Affordable Housing Trust Fund pipeline regulations.
All right. Staff, good afternoon. Tell us about the HTF pipeline. How do we make it go faster? How do we expand the width of the pipe?
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Zen Cervantes from the Office of the CAO.
Good afternoon.
And our office requests authorization for HSID to adopt and release the 2016 Affordable Housing Trust Fund pipeline regulations, solicits applications for the 2016 call for projects, and implement an allocation schedule after solicitation, which will include authority to up to 2 funding rounds for the call projects.
Very good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm fine. Ed Gibson, Housing Community Investment Department. Just to address a couple of your quick questions and add one thing. We did update the calendar inside there, which is in the CAO's report, to reflect an opening of the pipeline September 1st. Some of the key things that went into the regulations, they are updated every single year. We have to align them with TCAC and other federal rules, and then whatever the priorities are of the city here. One of the things is we've updated for permanent supportive housing, the definition of homelessness in lines with what HUD has required. We've further tightened the language with leasing preferences for coordinated entry or other type systems. A little bit change in the transit-oriented development definition to expand up to a half a mile.
Excuse me, what was that change from? Do you recall?
Well, there's some that are a quarter mile, so ours is a little bit wider than the tighter definitions.
It's the District 7 fix, Mr. Price, because up until this point, since I took office, the pipeline is a tremendous opportunity for the city of Los Angeles to put more housing online, getting the cooperation and authority from the state, except that our definitions were so narrow that it precluded, I think, 2 council districts, but primarily mine, from actually building housing along the arteries and roadways. And so by expanding it a half mile,
to a half mile, including the rapid
so it's an additional quarter mile consideration that we're putting in place that's going to actually afford more opportunity in light of what's anticipated to be the passage of Measure M. Isn't that right, Ms. Wong? Where there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in rapid transit, and we've got to figure out how to leverage all of that. So that's that little fix.
Correct. So one of the big ones that's also in the regs now is it's an increase in the developer fee that can be capitalized. So historically, we've been at $1.4 million and been there for a long number of years now, and that is now increased up to $2 million for a 9% tax credit deal and $2.5 million for a 4% bond deal, which will be good news for our developers.
How much is that going to generate for the city?
Well, it's not generating
for the fund, I should say.
It's not really generating money for the city. It's what's allowed in the project budget. So inside the budget now, the developers profit, if you will, of their line is it can be capitalized, paid for from proceeds from us or others, $1.4 million. Well, recognizing that a project of this nature takes 3, maybe more years to develop, recognizing that funding is drying up and then half their developer fee ends up being deferred anyway. At the end of the day, at 1.4, they've worked 3 years to get $700,000 and then they hope for the rest of the years to get paid out. So this change now kind of aligns us with the state, with the $2 million, and it allows them to collect up to $2 million capitalized. So if they do have to defer, they can never defer more than 50%, just the way the structure works. So that still leaves them money for 3 years worth of work, and that's more important and most important, particularly in our nonprofit housing development.
And it gets projects online where we were losing projects.
Yes, it
Right.
does.
Yeah.
So provides more incentive to get it right.
Okay, good.
So-
Mr. Price, I'm excited about this. Are you?
I am. I think it's going to be
Very
a great
good.
opportunity for us to increase the inventory as we are in want to do.
Let's go ahead and hear from the public. And actually, that speaker has exhausted all of his time. There are no speaker cards on this item. We'll go ahead and move this recommendation as presented by staff. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, would the committee be adopting the CAO report?
Yes, Mr. Carter.
Okay, very good. That takes us to item number 7, HCID and CAO reports relative to the release of an RFP to solicit bids for occupancy monitoring services.
Very good. Good afternoon, staff. Ms. Cervantes, let her rip.
Good afternoon. Mr. Vantes from CAO. Subsequent to releasing our report, the HUD requested that they amend their RFP with enhanced scope of services. We reviewed this and we concur. Therefore, we'd like to amend our recommendation 1A to authorize HUD to prepare and release a RFP to solicit bids for occupancy monitoring services in conformance to the attached RFP, which has been provided to you guys, with an amended scope of services to construct a database and reports to collect tenant accessibility information from property owners and managers, subject to the review and approval of the city attorney as to form and legality. And the rest of the report remains the same. Any questions?
Do you concur, Department?
Absolutely.
Fantastic, Mr. Price.
I concur as well.
Very good. Colleagues, we will go ahead and adopt the recommendations as presented by staff. And
The CAO report, yes.
Yeah, and there are no speaker cards on this item that are eligible to speak. Very good. That brings us to public comment.
General public.
Oh, goody. If we can have the pig and his puppet come on up, please. I'm sorry, it says the pig. My apologies.
You got it right.
So, how come after a whole 6-week vacation, nobody shows up to the meetings anymore? Cedillo, well, we know Cedillo's in probably very critical condition. All the diabetes eating his liver and his mind. The pressures of
Mr. Spindler,
all the things.
you're allowed to speak in public comment with items that are germane to the Housing Committee,
Yeah.
not to diabetes or
it
or anything
relates.
else.
Does not that relate, Mr. City Attorney? I mean, he's evicting all of these people in CD1 and the pressure's getting to his brain. And that's the reason why he gets sick. Health disabilities and problems from the guilt. Jose Weezer, he doesn't come anymore. And Marchese from the Wheezy is not here. So without these people, I think the fine lady made a good comment. You guys disrespect these wonderful speakers when you don't show up and have a quorum.
Emilia Lome, would you like to speak on general public comment?
I think that pig already spoke part of it. But I guess I want to make an observation as a citizen and not for the developer that I work with. It's of concern to me that although we work in Northeast LA, that Mr. Weisar, Councilman Weisar, has not had a presence here for many months. So, you know, I'm retired from the university and had to look over the student body. And if I had committees for which, you know, certain students and or staff represented a certain constituency and they were not there, after so many absences, we needed to have somebody present who represented the interests of their constituency. So I am not aware of what your policies are, but I would like to express concern, and maybe if I'm entitled to some explanation in the future, why Mr. Weezer has seen it fit not to come to these meetings, and whether he has lost his right to be in this committee or has no interest and have somebody that will. I'm not going to address the question of quorum, but that's of concern as well.
Very good. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Price, that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting. There is no further items before us. We are adjourned.